You're listening to the PT Pintcast, where smart people in healthcare come to make noise. Here's your host, Jimmy McKay.
All right, big thanks to SaRA Health, the remote care platform helping clinics boost revenue without having to add staff, keeping it simple. They automate daily patient check-ins via text message, and that means no app. That means no login. I mean, say less if you get to that point. Just better outcomes. It's a simple way to actually meet those RTM requirements, improve follow-through, and actually get reimbursed for care between visits. You can care between visits and get paid for that. It's skilled. Easy to set up, simple to use, and patients love it. Visit them at SaRAHealth.com. It's SaRA without an H. Don't get confused. One H. SaRAHealth.com. Our guest today's been in the trenches, the boardroom, the NFL sidelines. He's helped build one of the largest PT networks in the country, worked with elite athletes, and mentored generations of clinicians. And now, after 5 decades in the game, he's got opinions about where this thing is headed and how do we thrive in it, right? We didn't show up to come in last, right? We want to thrive. From co-founding professional physical therapy to overseeing health, performance, and innovation in pro sports, this guy's career is like a roadmap, but like nobody else's. Rob joins the show right now. Rob, welcome to the program. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
I don't even know where to start. Like your LinkedIn profile, like gave me whiplash a little bit, just reading all the different things that you've done. How do you explain, like how do you wrap up a career like that into an explanation? I don't think an intro can do it justice.
I just think, as you and I have had discussions, I just think you you work hard, you place efforts, and some decisions you'll make and some decisions will be made for you,
Yeah.
And, we spoke a little bit before. I used to be the head strength and conditioning coach at St. John's University with Coach Lou Conaseca. And those of you who are young, I know Coach Conaseca. He's a Hall of Fame basketball coach, won 3 out of every 4 games he coached.
Wow.
And I asked him once, and I pretty much thought I had the obvious answer, but I just wanted his opinion. I said, Coach, what's more important to winning a basketball game, the coaching or the players?
Okay.
And he didn't answer me right away. He just looked at me, paused, and said, 60% players, 30% coaching, and 10% luck.
Yeah,
But you make your own luck. Sure. And that kind of stuck with me. And so I think you make your own luck, and that helps develop the pathways of your career.
Yeah, luck favors the people who actually show up, right? Opportunity plus preparation. When you say work hard, what does it mean in 2026? Like, what is it, and is it different than it was in 2006 or 1986?
I think working hard has always been working hard. I think, we've spoken a little bit before. What's new isn't always new, right? There's some consistency of what was old. Communication, right? You have to be able to communicate. That's always been, a founding, entity of success. Just things like that. That has never changed. And so I think situations change, but I think work effort doesn't change with regards to a definition, just the application may change, so to speak, based on the situation presented, right? So
Agreed. All right, but you've had an amazing career. Is it repeatable today, right? So, I guess the question is, how much of someone's path is what Coach Conaseca said, which is like, hey, is it timing? Is it luck? Is it luck meets preparation? That's what luck is, versus intent. Like, that's what we're looking for, which is like, you've had the amazing career. Is it repeatable for anybody?
Yeah, I think it is. Sure. You still need, directors of rehab. You still need good care. I think the field is wide open. I understand the hurdles to go through it, and the hurdles change. Like when I first started in my career, when you had surgery, there was a surgeon and an assistant attending surgeon, right? What do you have now? The fellow and PAs. No disrespect. It just changed. On a hospital floor, you had 8 PTs. Now you have 4 PTs and 4 PTAs, right? Because you had to adjust. You had to change with the times, whether it was reimbursement, whether it was legalities, whatever it may be. And so you adapt and you change with the times, but the opportunities are still going to be there. You talk about luck. My owner, when I was in the NFL, my owner told me he'll take luck 100% all the time versus anything else because luck's 100%. So, if you make your own luck, I think part of that is through the hard effort and doing the things that maybe other people aren't willing to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not willing to make the efforts, don't expect the same rewards of those who do.
Understood.
That's all I'm saying with regards to some of the things I've written.
Is there a point where you could reassess mid-game and say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze? I'm putting more effort, I'm providing more opportunity and more hard work, but the ROI is lower. We interviewed Larry Benz just a couple days ago, and he's done the math. I'm not going to question his math unless I use AI because I can't. But he said right now we're at a 0.69. You put $1 in, you get 69 cents out in terms of education and cost, and then salary.
Well,
is there?
We're talking about two different things now. I'm talking about his career. You're talking about running a business. Those are two different things, even though they meet, right? Because they meet. Because in a business, you can only when the expense line crosses the income line, you're out of business, right?
Correct.
And so there is definitive limitations on what you can do and the monies you have and the decisions you make on how you're going to spend those monies. So with regards to the PT's career, I think there are limitations on ROI. What are some examples of those limitations? One is when you're one of the better people in the organization and you're very dependable, everybody's going to go to you with the tasks at hand, right?
The harder one too.
Right. So you may be asked to do more work than other people because you're more dependable. Now, are you compensated and are you treated fairly for doing that extra work? And if you're not, that's not right. So then maybe I would advise you to look for employment elsewhere or opportunity elsewhere. If you are, then you have to decide, is the benefits I'm getting from working harder than everybody else worth it? So, if you're not getting those benefits, no, then the ROI wasn't worth it, right? You're just getting someone who's being overwhelmed with work and not rewarded for that.
Right. I was taught this early in my career. There were some jobs around the radio station that were necessary, that weren't as fun. I was excited to be in the building. So I was like, I don't care what you got. You need a toilet cleaned, whatever you need. And I learned the breaking dishes theory, which was we asked some people who had some experience to do some of these things that needed to be done. And they would do them, but out of malicious compliance. They do them poorly on purpose so that someone would have to redo them so that then they'd stop asking that person in the first place.
Sure.
Sort of a negative feedback loop. Sure. And you don't want to be that person. But then the flip side is we've heard if you're good at your job, you get rewarded with more work, which is a hard pill to swallow. But I think you give good advice, which is you have to ask yourself if what is happening is okay. And if it isn't, you got to move.
So let's take the same scenarios. You're an attorney and you've just graduated law school and you've joined a firm and you desire to become a partner. Who's more likely to become a partner in that law firm? The person who's overwhelmed with work and is successfully producing with the wealth work assigned to them, or the person who is continually, purposely doing things incorrectly so they don't get more work. Right. So again, don't complain if you don't receive the rewards for your efforts. Now, if you don't think you're treated fairly for the effort you're making, then to stay there
time to make a decision.
For a long period of time and nothing changed, shame on you, right? Yeah. So,
that's when I was introduced to the sunk cost fallacy. I'd never heard of that before. And it really was, well, you've done so, you've been here for X long, or you've invested. And what you should look at is, well, what is the other side of that? I could have stayed in radio past 2010, but I looked ahead 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I said, I don't like the way that returns, not even just monetarily. For me, it was turning into something I wouldn't have signed up that day knowing what it looked like a year from then. That's when I did the math and decided to leave.
And two things that I'll point out to you that I've experienced, all right, both personally and as an imposition of authority, if you want to use that term. One is, don't be surprised when you give your resignation, as that's when all the rewards are offered.
Right.
Because they don't want to lose you, right?
Right.
So, like, where were you before it came to this point?
Correct.
again, you have to decide at that point in time, okay, I'll stay, or no, it's too late. I've got a better offer. I'll go. Right.
Yep.
The other thing is when an organization or a team or an entity over time becomes very successful, often the people that have contributed to that success, their contributions are acknowledged, but oftentimes people think their contributions carry more weight or have more value than in reality they did. And that's an other side of that coin conversation. You sometimes have to say that, yes, you got X because this is what you're deserving for these reasons. You didn't get Y, even though you think you deserve Y, again, for these reasons. So there's both sides of that coin as well.
Yep. Yeah, I've learned, or I was smart enough to read books by smart people. Chris Voss was an FBI hostage negotiator, and he outlines, listen, if someone's speaking to you in logic and you're speaking back in emotion, you will never see eye to eye. You're speaking English, but you're speaking two different languages there. So you have to make sure you both understand the conversation that you're having, or there's misalignment, and nothing is worse than that. Imagine someone working 10 years and assuming that what they were doing was X, when in reality it was valued at Y the whole time. And that is when you see misalignment, and that's when frustrations pop up.
Yeah, 100%. And if someone, listen, I would put some of that responsibility on their supervisor, because supervisors, in my mind, are responsible for clarity, right?
But what was your line before? It might not be my fault, but it's still my problem.
It's not my fault, but it's my problem. So you own a physical therapy, Larry, right? You own a physical therapy business, and his biggest referring physician gets upset because an employee, a physical therapist, injured one of their patients or ruined a surgery. Larry didn't do that, but he's going to get called from the physician saying, I'm never sending you a patient again. Not my fault, but it's my problem. Yeah. Right. And so you address these things.
Yeah. Some of the best advice I usually say is, before you point a finger, like, how could I have done this better? Or did I cause this? If you start there and you own it, even if it wasn't your fault, if you start there, probably a better chance of seeing a better resolution.
Sure.
Yeah. What do you think newer grads misunderstand about what it takes to succeed? Where's the misalignment? What advice? I mean, you've mentored people at all different levels. What are some of the common misconceptions?
I think communication has to improve. Now and just so you know, as we're speaking, and I didn't have to do this, okay? I had to walk to school, but I have to walk to school 2 miles uphill and 4 feet of snow both ways, all right? And if I did, I wouldn't expect someone else to do that, because if you had a better way to do that, God bless you. Don't be the idiot, and choose the harder choice, right? So I think communication is not what it used to be in some ways. And I'll go back, and again, I don't mean to sound like, the older guy, but, today's day and age, like I have friends of mine, my children are a little older, but I have friends of mine whose kids are in high school. They ask a girl out on a date via text. They break up via text. There is something to having the courage to going up and possibly getting rejected. Yeah. There is something to actually getting rejected and learning to talk, because life is full of rejections, right? I mean, you read things nowadays where people, 20% of the population, I've read, whether true or not, 20% of the population are bringing their parents to job interviews, right? I mean, so there are certain, be able to do, those are the things you need to be able to do in those instances where those things are coming. So you have to be able to communicate your feelings, your thoughts, whether verbally, in writing, etc. I also don't think you poo-poo a lot of the things that were done in the past. Mm-hmm. What do you poo-poo? When I started in physical therapy and sports medicine, we casted our ACLs at 30 degrees in knee flexion, 20 degrees for 6 to 8 weeks. I would take today's rehab with an ACL 10 times and twice on Sundays over the ACL of 40 years ago, right? But some of the principles, some of the work ethics, some of the things that have worked have surpassed the test of time and continue to be, effective. And so don't say just because we did that 20 or 30 years ago that you should poo-poo it, because we have adapted as professionals, regardless of the profession you're in, through the decades, because if you haven't adapted, you'd be out of business.
Sure.
Right? Or you wouldn't be a successful therapist or whatever it may be. But some of those principles also came along for the ride, like in strength and conditioning. They'll talk about, they used to say the next machine would be the next best thing to free weights. Well, the free weights was a standard. We still use free weights. We still squat. We still do things that were exercises over 100 years ago. Now, new exercises evolved. Have technology made things better? 100%. But some things have survived and passed the test of time for a reason.
Yeah,
right?
those basics.
Principles, exercise, whatever it may be.
One of my first episodes started this podcast by accident as a student, and for some reason it's still going. But Eric Mera, who was a sports physical therapist, gave me his 3 A's. I want to see if you agree with his 3 A's. I said, it was halfway through PT school. I was thinking about sports, and I said, how do you be a great sports physical therapist? I was expecting some big fancy answer, and Eric went the other way, and I still remember this from 10 years ago. He said you need the 3 A's. You need to be available. Sports are a 24/7, 365 situation, especially athletes. This is their body, their livelihood, their future. So he said, you got to be available and you got to understand that. He said, you got to be affable, meaning having a good, you have to be, people have to want to be around you. These guys have a choice. They could pick from lots of people. If you're got an attitude, you ain't going to be there. And then the third one, it confused me even more. He said adequate. He said, you need to know the basics well. You can figure out the other stuff. So he said available, affable, adequate. How'd Eric do?
He did well. I agree with him. I think there's other things, but all right, so you have to be available. There goes your 40-hour work week.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right? You got to know that going in. Yeah.
You have to be, accepted by everyone. Communication.
Yep.
Right. And then the third one, if you don't have the basics, so we'll talk about physical qualities, because I'm not that bright a guy sometimes, right? So I like to make analogies, okay? Because it's easier. It's easier to explain yourself. The old saying, if you can explain it to a 6th grader, which I'm not insinuating you're a 6th grader, but then it's very easy, right? So when we talk about physical qualities, strength, power, speed, things like that, right? Well, strength is the ability to produce force. So if you can't produce force, how are you going to produce force quickly?
Right.
Right. So if you don't have the basics, whether it's knowledge and or clinical skills, if you don't understand that or know things, how are you going to progress it? So for instance, you see me doing an exercise and you like that. You don't know why I'm doing it, but you like it and you start to do an exercise. Okay. And it works. And now your athlete has plateaued on that exercise. You want to progress the exercise. Well, if you don't know what the exercise is and what it does, how are you going to progress it?
Right.
So you need to know the basics. And Eric's right on that as well.
Yep.
Whether it's business, whether it's treating a patient, whether it's treating people, right? Courteous, whatever it may be. Yep. So you have to know the basics.
Yep. You said PTs need to bring value in the organization. Yes. I say
everybody, not just PTs, everyone. Sure.
Right. I say understand what game you're playing. If you want more output, you got to understand which inputs lead to more output the most efficient way, right?
Yep.
How would you explain to a new grad right now who defines that value? What's the best way to get in alignment? Sounds like it's sports, not coach, but owner. What's the best way to do that?
Well, value is evaluated by everyone, right? So as you go to a course, so you want to spend time with another therapist, was it worth the value of your time, right? When your patients are being treated by you, I'm going to make subsequent appointments because you provide value. I'm getting better, right? When the patient goes back to their referring physician and they get nothing but you get nothing but praises as a clinician and no complaints, that physician is going to send you more patients. You provided value, right? They don't have to deal with headaches. They're just getting, their patients are having good outcomes. Right, now the patients are happy. They're sending you their families and friends. The doctors are happy. They talk about you. So they themselves, as well as their peers in the physician group, start sending you patients. And now the ownership says, well, wait a minute. You do your notes on time. You do what I ask. You have great outcomes. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to promote you. You deserve a raise. I'm going to make you a junior partner, whatever it is. And they see you as providing value. So providing value goes across the board, right? But it starts with yourself. If I want to provide value, what are the things that are necessary for me to accomplish so that I increase my worth, my value, as a general term, if you know what I'm saying? Yep. And that's what I mean when I say no one gets rewarded for not bringing value, right? Yep. If you can't get your notes on time, if your patients are always canceling, if the doctors are always complaining about you, not only are you not going to get any of the rewards, you're probably not going to have a job, right? So
were there any things that you could spot on an interview? Professional physical therapy for, more than 2 decades, co-founder, CEO, CCO, you've pretty much done it all. Were there things you looked for? Was there a favorite interview question when you couldn't see them in the clinic, when you were trying to evaluate? Because that's a gamble. Like when you're hiring someone, that's a risk and you're hoping it pays off. Were there things that you looked for?
Yeah, I would want to know what people's desires are, what their goals are. You ask them questions about, work ethic, things like that. They're always going to give you the right answers. Right. I mean, a couple of things that stand out, one of my co-founders, he used to like the question, if you were a twin, why should I hire you? And one time versus your twin. And one time the candidate looked at me and said, well, as a matter of fact, I am a twin, and this is why you should hire me. And then I've had a person where they pulled up their chair to the desk, leaned forward like this, and said to me, I need to know I need to know how I'm going to make partner. So I've had that end of it too. And you're not even hired yet and you're asking me how you're going to make partner. Right. So, everything in between. So I just think part of it is a gut feeling through experience. A lot of it is through the recommendations. As the older you get, the smaller the world gets. That's true. And so the phone calls you make are probably maybe someone you sat next to in high school or in PT school or worked with, or speak at conferences with, or whatever, and they're going to be pretty honest with you with regards to the recommendation they made for this individual who's now a candidate for a position in your company. And so I put a lot on that as well.
Yeah, there's a line. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I say it's not what you know. It's not just who you know. It's what those people will say about it. What do they know about you? So just being known, that doesn't solve the problem, because that person's going to ask another question. Would you hire this person? In 6 months, am I going to be happy about this? That's what you want to understand, what that person knows about you. Yeah. Just being known. Listen, I think we're both in agreement here. Reimbursement will likely not improve. I would say act as if it's not going to improve. Great. Well, now what are you going to do about it? Pretend. And if it does, great. Pretend it's not. Where do you see the realistic levers of change? Where are the best levers to pull to get the most output in 2026 as we go forward?
Well, Charlie Francis is a sprint coach, and I always go back to strength and conditioning and sports and stuff because I really like that, as well as I love therapy. Don't get me wrong, but I wish I spent more personal time with Charlie. But I got to know Charlie, and I'm very good friends with his protege, a guy named Derek Hansen. And Charlie's big thing, if you first met Charlie, he could frustrate you. We consulted together with another friend of mine, Alvin Vermeil, with the NFL pro team for a while. And you'd ask Charlie a question, and he'd say, well, it depends. And all Charlie was saying was, I need more specifics, right? And so what I'm saying to you with reimbursements, it depends. So let's take a private practice, individual private practice. And I don't want to get into the politics of hospital versus corporate versus private practice. Everyone has its benefits. Everyone has its, disadvantages. Okay. So you go to a single private practice, they're trying to survive, right? They have a single, and they have to either decide, I'm going to take this rate or I'm not going to take this rate. I'm going to go at a network, right? And I'll make more money. And that may be true, but if out of network benefits end, if you want to get acquired, probably someone by a corporate entity or something, they're probably not going to take you because they want you to be in network. They don't want to take a chance on the out of networks changing and all those types of things. So you survive that way. When you're a corporate entity, and if you've been following the field, a lot of companies are partnering. I'm not saying being acquired by. A lot of companies are partnering with hospital institutions. Like just yesterday, you saw a thing where NYU, New York, partnered with U.S. Physical Therapy. And so with us, we have a partnership too with a hospital system. But what we did was, and you've read a little bit what I put on paper. We established an educational curriculum that essentially that you went through, and then we also offer an OCS residency and a manual therapy and fellowship. And in our curriculum, what we hired an outside entity for an outcome company to look at our results so that we couldn't fudge the numbers, right? Because if it's in-house, who knows what may happen on the data,
right?
And any entity, any organization. I hope everybody's honest, but that's not always the case. And so as our outcomes improved, right, and we covered the body, foot, ankle, up to the cervical spine. So if we had therapists that, let's say, had trouble, low outcomes on cervical spine, we'd recommend they needed more work on cervical spine. If they had problem with knee, they'd have to take more work in knee through our curriculum. And we also provide monies for outside education as well for other entities, okay? Mm-hmm. And so if the outcomes were not improving, we had to look at ourselves saying, are we not teaching the right things, right? So it was a checks and balances system. Now, everyone says they give good care. And they probably do, all right? Let's just say, how do you prove it?
Right.
How do you prove it? So we had outcomes and we went to payers, and some payers agreed, since you're more effective and you're more efficient, and also the advantage of having a larger footprint, right? Because we didn't have to worry about people where they were going, et cetera. We were able to negotiate better rates than maybe the single practice standing practice, right? Single individual standing practice. So if we are able to negotiate higher rates, just like other PT companies can, then essentially you have more money, not only for business operations, but salaries and those types of things, right? So you give me this scenario and I'll say, yes, you're right. We're going to have a problem with rates. Now, is anybody happy with their rate? No. Yeah. Just some people, even parts of the country. Look at parts of the country. Workman's comp is paid unbelievably in certain parts of the country and terrible. Country and terrible in other parts of the country. Why is that? Why is it? So, it depends. It depends where you live, what's your situation, etc. Now, generally, yes, I agree with you. Rates are not going to go up.
Right.
So what are you going to do as an individual private practitioner, meaning the clinician, the new grad clinician or the young therapist, to create the value that we previously discussed, to put yourself in a situation so that you have the professional and financial desires. You achieve those things that you reach for. This morning, someone responded on a LinkedIn to me, a gentleman, saying he works 5 jobs and there is opportunity in the profession to make more money. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. I commend your work ethic. 20 years from now, you're not going to want to work 5 jobs. Right. You're not going to physically be able to work 5 jobs. So it's not just working the 5 jobs to make extra income. How are those 5 jobs helping you in your plan so that if you want to be a hospital administrator, if you want to be, meaning a CEO, vice president, COO, whatever it may be, how does that plan help you achieve that? Help you achieve a partnership in a private practice that you're already working in? Help you open up your own private practice? Help you work for an insurance company on the other side of the coin? Help you to become the director of a PT program at an institution or a college, right? Whether it's a hospital or college. How do those 5 jobs help you achieve that thing? So 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road, you're working 1 job and you've attained the professional success and the financial success you desire. Or you work 40 hours a week, and there's nothing wrong with this. Not everybody could be a chief. You need Indians too. You work 40 hours a week. You go to work, you do your job, and you go home. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't complain that you don't have the rewards of someone who has gone over and beyond when you've just stayed with an average job and remained in that capacity, so to speak, in an average work week, not an average job. I think it's a great profession. But there's plenty of opportunity out there. People are still getting hurt. I'm part of the God, I just went blank. The baby boom, right? I'm the tail end of the baby boom. We're getting older. We're still saying there's going to be plenty of business out there, right? So how are you going to take advantage of, success in regards to this business that's going to be available? Yep. It's viable.
Yep.
And I'm not disagreeing with Larry. Yeah, it cost me this, it cost me, but that's business. That's once you're a business owner or you're the CEO of a company or the COO or CFO of a company. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how are you going to get to that point?
Understood. All right. We have a tradition on the show, Rob. It's called the parting shot.
This is the parting shot. One last mic drop moment. No pressure, just your legacy on the line.
No pressure. No pressure whatsoever. I do want to say thanks to Empower EMR. If your clinic's stuck in an EMR that slows you down, Empower gives you speed, clean workflows, and features PTs actually asked for. Better notes, faster documentation, smoother operations, all wrapped up in customer support that doesn't ghost you. Upgrade your clinic's brain with Empower EMR. Find them online and kick the tires at empoweremr.com. It's empoweremr.com. So the parting shot is all up to you. Could be a final soapbox statement, mic drop moment, quote from somebody, anything you want. What do you want to leave people as we wrap up?
I have a relationship with Hall of Fame football coach Bill Parcells, and I've known him through years, and he really was instrumental not only in when I worked in business, but also when I was in the NFL. I would call him and speak to him often enough, and he has a number of sayings, and as a person, not only is he very intelligent, but he's probably one of the wisest men I've ever met. And he has a saying: there's a big difference between routine and commitment. And that is very true. I mean, you could go to your job and do the same thing and go home, like I said, or you could be committed to your career and decide that I'm going to do whatever it takes. And everybody, that's a different level of commitment. Sure. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to do whatever it takes for me to put myself in the position that I want to be in. So routine versus commitment.
Well said. We'll put the link in the show notes for people to connect with Rob on LinkedIn. Thanks for the time and sharing the insight of a couple of decades in the profession, man. This is great.
Yep.
That's it for this one. But we're just getting warmed up. Smash follow, send it to a friend, or crank up the next episode. Want to go deeper? Hit us at ptpintcast.com. Or find us on YouTube and socials at ptpintcast. And legally, none of this was advice. It's for entertainment purposes only. See, Keith, we read the script. Happy now.